Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is KomodoDragonJesus Vita. I'm here for Poker VIP, and today I'm going to be continuing showing you how to beat the 200 no limit snap games on 888. And if you haven't seen the last video, make sure to go check it out. We're going to stick to the same basic strategy, which is basically going to be play a solid default game in a setting where there are no HUDs, and then take notes on players and adjust accordingly whenever we have the chance. So let's get right into it. I've been playing this session for a few minutes now, and it's going well so far. The pool is fairly small right now. We got about a 26 player pool right now, but there's still plenty of soft spots. And one of the things I kind of like about these small pools is that sure, there aren't, like 100 casual players, but the casual players that are out there, you get to play lots of hands with them. And in fact, sorry guys for the pop-up, I'm just going here, giving some fish bones to a lot of the players I see with less than 100 big blinds. I'm going to start off with a call with my 6-5. And the plan would very likely be to check raise the turn. He decides to go for a check back. And I'm going to lead the river. I'm not incredibly optimistic about this river. And that's essentially because I don't think he's going to have too many kings. I'd expect King Queen, King Jack, King 10, all those types of hands just keep on barreling. I'm going to call the river as well. Sure, he can have some flushes, but also some worse hands for value. Something like King 9 pops into mind that will definitely play it, their hand this way. Let's see how it goes. And we get the unfortunate news that he rivered the flush. That's too bad. So we're going to be playing relatively tight in these games. Of course, that's not an excuse to fold the deuce 4. That's, of course, always a standard fold. Same goes for the 5-3. Let's see if we can find something nice to play. King Jack in the big blind, not bad. And we're going to see maybe we can get some incredible odds here with the 5-3 in the big blind. Just for a heads up pot, this is not going to be a defend, and once the 3-bet comes in, that's another fold. It's a little bit of a glitch on 888 where sometimes instead of topping you up, it just sits you out. It's mildly annoying, but you just get to sit back in, so it doesn't really do any harm. So we got this dry king high board that I'm typically going to have a pretty nice range advantage on. I'm just going to start it off with a pretty small bet. And looks like we take it down. How does this table look? Got at least 2 casual players here. I'm going to open up the deuces, which is not always a raise from me under the gun. I'll be defending my king queen. And once again, just a lovely flop. We see a fairly standard size c-bet. Nothing too exciting there. We're going to start off with the call. I think King Queen is a little bit loose to go for the check raise there, and of course folding is out of the question. And he goes for the check back, and I'm just going to put in a little bit of a medium-sized value bet here. Yeah, $15. Let's go with that. Something I think that will get called by a fair amount of well, one, any worse queen that he could possibly have, but also a fair enough of hands like, fair amount of hands like 9s, 10s, 7s, stuff like that. That's actually a spot that can get a little bit scary pretty quickly. Essentially because, just bring it up here real quick. If we look at this texture, the 6 comes on the turn, and I'm going to have very, very few 6s in my range when check calling the flop. It'll basically be, pocket 6s. Maybe something like 5-6 suited if I'm defending that day. What is this? Raise and re-raise? Yeah, I guess I'm out. So that's a spot where if villain turns a 6, he can often just check it back, and I think that's play a lot of people will default to. But when he gets to the river, because I can't have many 6s and he can actually raise me a little bit liberally there. Luckily that doesn't happen. But if you guys are getting into situations like that yourself, just try to look out for those spots where, maybe it's a situation where your opponent can't really have something in his range, and if that something represents the nuts or close to it, then it might be a good spot to throw in an aggressive line. I went for a c-bet with the king-9, and I think now I'm just going to take a check call line. He bets really small. I'm wondering if this is enough reason to go for a raise. If I do, it would definitely be on the light side. We go for the check call again and check call the river. A lot of casual players try to take this line where they kind of like bet really small on the flop and then bet really small on the turn and then just completely bomb the river. It's not a complete bomb, but it's close enough. And essentially they do that because they figure if you didn't raise them on the flop and you didn't raise them on the turn, then they're likely to get a lot of folds, and frankly that's true. But I have a reasonably strong hand here, so we're going to go for the call, see what he shows up with, and that is a king-jack of diamonds. So, going to bring up my notes here, see if we can write down something nice. Mainly, I don't think his river play is all that exciting, but the turn bet sizing is kind of interesting. There we go. I think we can actually start out betting pretty small here with the ace-9. I think really if I'm trying to be consistent, my sizing should be a little smaller than it actually was there. It's a board I'm going to be wanting to bet just about everything on, and it's not really going to connect with this range all that well. Basically, the bet size I took here is 650 into 16. I have no idea what actual percentage of the pot that is, but I think I'd like something closer to like 30-35%. So you got this player limping a lot of pots, and I'm going to slowly see how far I can push him. The past hand, I believe I raised to 4 big blinds, and I'm raising to 5. Next time, if I have a strong hand, maybe we'll try 6, 7, 9, 10. And yeah, there's got to be a limit somewhere that he's willing to check call, or limp call. And we got ace-king here. It's a pretty dry board. I think I'm once again just willing to bet this quite liberally. I'm not going to get bet super small for 2 reasons. One, last time, I believe it was this same player. Let me just kind of check to make sure. Yeah, it was the same player. When I underbet him, he raised me, which, could have been a nice strong hand. Or it could just be disrespect for underbets. So while I think the underbet strategy is a really good one to take, if villain is just going to play super aggressively against it, you can, adjust your strategy a little bit to take advantage of that. All right, continuing with small sizings. This guy goes for a check call. and then leads the turn really small. This is the guy that showed up with King Jack earlier. I will not be folding to this, and we'll see if we just see a very large bet on the river. And we do. And I do think this is an interesting spot, mainly because he's repping a really strong hand here with the double pot over bet. And I guess there's some sets. He can have some 3 of a kinds, but it's not a line I would expect with something like an 8. And he decides to throw a cake at me. All right, man. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be calling this. I don't think ace-jack is quite good enough. I did defend against the 3-bet with the ace-4, which I kind of feel marginally about, but he made a pretty small 3-bet, so I think I'm okay with it. We're certainly going to have the equity. If we see a check back on this turn, I think river might be pretty reasonable to throw out a bluff. Unimproved, of course. That's an improvement. Okay, so now we pull ahead of like all ace hands like ace jack through ace king, which I think are reasonable ones for him to want to check down. My initial bet sizing strategy going into this was thinking that I might want to overbet some blank rivers if I didn't improve, because he's going to have so few 10s in his range. But I think this might be good enough. There's not much difference between a pair of 4s here and something like pocket 8s, because I don't expect him to be 3-betting with stuff like 6s and 7s pre-flop. Though I guess there's the small difference, the times he has ace-5 or the time he has something like 6-5 suited. And we always want to go back and see. That's interesting. Okay. The player actually showed up with a 7-9 of clubs. So, I mean, there's several interesting things about that hand. One, that he decides to check back the turn with the flush draw, which I think is reasonable, and the other being that he decides not to bluff the river. And the river's got to be an annoying spot for him. Essentially because even though I didn't lead out to him on the river, I can still check raise. So a good range of hands I'd want to do that against, say, for example, villain has an overpair, pocket queens, pocket aces, something like that. He decides to check turn for pot control, but I assume he'll just be value betting all those hands on the river to get his value from other pairs. In a spot like that, we can just go for a river check raise with any 10 or better and, just put him in a really, really tough spot. I'm going to continue checking back my 6s, though I do think it is close to meriting turning itself into a bluff. Even though I think it's the right play on the flop a majority of the time, I do think checking back this flop does my range a very, very big disservice. Essentially because following that line, it becomes really hard for me to just go like bet big, because most people will just bet their aces on the flop. And therefore, I won't get too much credit with that line. We have a limp call, once again from this player. A very coordinated board here. Lots of things that can happen, so we are going to start with a more polarized range, betting larger. And having the nut flush draw is, of course, excellent there. We want to put in a lot of money because a lot of his calling range is simply going to be worse draws. And, there's that thing where we can make the nuts. That thing kind of counts too. So we see another 3-bet here, and I mean, it is a reasonable size, but relative to what a lot of players are doing, and even to what I'm doing, this is a very small 3-bet. And what that does, it just gives me better odds to continue with a lot of hands, and that means I am going to be continuing with 7s pretty happily. We faced a limp on the right, and I'm just going to lead out. He min raises. Okay, I've got top pair. We'll put in a little bit more money, but you know, this is a spot that could get scary fast. And I do think the 7s are close here. I'm just going to choose to fold it right away. But that might mean that I'm overfolding that spot a little bit. Okay, 5 on the river is excellent. We beat everything except for his 2-pair better combos. There's pretty much every draw in the world missed, so I think going for a check call on the river will work pretty well. He's also going to value bet worse hands as well. Stuff like, you know, anytime he's got a worse 2-pair, king 4, 8-9. I don't know if 8-9 really raises the flop, but you know, it could. As well as some stuff like king queen. So pretty happily, oh, there it is, king queen, love it. And I do think that spot would have been a little thin to throw in a check raise on the river, essentially because while, yeah, he is value betting his king queens and, you know, his king 4s and stuff, he's also going to have stuff like sets. He's also going to have stuff like king 9, king 8. And I do believe 1 straight made it in on the river, which will be rare, but we'll show up with that once in a while. Got a couple jack 10s here. This one's going to fold. Not much going on this flop. I'm going to choose to check back the jack 10, and this is not just, you know, me choosing to give up with a hand completely right off the bat. But it's just essentially me deciding to delay my bluff until a later street. The times where I bet jack 10 and get called here, and I turn a jack or a 10, I'm going to want to pot control the hell out of it. So I think jack 10 kind of benefits from keeping the pot small on the flop, and then, you know, if I turn something to improve, I can pretty happily go call, or unimproved, if he checks to me, I can just bet and attempt to take it down. I think on that board, on that turn, if I wasn't bet into, I could very, very easily represent 6. And I'm going to call here with the king 4. Got the limper over here, who will hopefully be a nice juicy addition to the pot. We're getting pretty good odds with a reasonable hand. And apparently the theme of today's video is just get 3-bet small and don't fold to it. Pretty nice flop. Okay, I'm going to get the easy decision out of the way here with king 10 and bet it. And I think there's an interesting decision on whether or not I want to bluff king 6. I'm definitely going to have more 7s than button. I might have more 7s than this limper here. I don't know what his range looks like. But I think into 2 players this might be a little too optimistic, especially since the high card turns, you know, queens, jacks, kings, aces, are going to hit button's check-back range fairly well. And therefore I think our bluff will be just a little less successful. And this hand, of course, has absolutely nothing going on for it. Erotic Kitty goes for a check. I'm going to start out with a bluff on this board, blind versus blind. Erotic Kitty is, of course, a reg, so he's going to get my nice little multicolor reg tag there. I think on the spectrum of turn cards that I would like to bluff, this one falls pretty low. So I'm going to check back the turn. Also throwing in a 3-bet with the queen jack. Okay, very low, very dry board. There shouldn't be too much of this in villain's range. We are going to start off with a bet. I hate doing this math. 1/3 pot is probably somewhere around 17. Let's do it. I'm actually going to check back my queen jack here as well. Not really expecting to win a bunch, but just the way the board ran out, I imagine most hands that are calling on the flop will be calling river as well. We get a very, very excellent turn card, so I'm going to bet this in a way that I can set up for a river shove. Something like... I think 52 is reasonable here. And I do plan on shoving just about every river here. Now, if you're wondering why, mainly because there aren't too many kings in his range. My range gets kind of narrow on the river. I'm basically representing like ace, king, or better. I'm still going to do it, but this cuts a lot of hands out of my value range. So maybe we get looked up later. I don't think we're getting peeled by too many ace highs going into the river though. So it still should be a spot where I have a pretty nice advantage. Unless, of course, villain has a full house. You know, that's unfortunately going to happen once in a while. We're going to open up an ace-9 here. A couple of shorter stacks in the blinds. We definitely want to play with them. And, okay, looks like we're going multi-way. Queen, queen, 6, multi-way is going to start off with a check for me. Ooh, third queen, that's always fun. I think this is a relatively easy fold with the player behind. Not that I really expect him to have much, though. We're going to have a raise with 5-6. We're going to have a raise with the Jack-5, and there's a little bit of another 8-8-8 glitch, which has basically already sorted itself out. Okay, so we flop a flush draw, it's three-way. If Howdy was deep stacked and aggressive, I think I'd strongly consider checking this flop with a decent amount of my range. I think Queen 9 would still find its way into a bet. But the shorter stack he is, the more I just want to go bet and kind of mash all the money in. With, of course, a bunch of value hands and strong draws such as that one. And we got ourselves a mighty fine hand on the left. Queen 7 very likely will be defending the big blind, either by 3-betting or calling. Against a min-raise, I think we can just get away with calling. And once he checks back this flop, I'm going to very likely go for just a bet line. River's kind of annoying. I'm also just going to start off with a check back with my ace-8 against the casual player. I think against regs I'd want to take a more balanced line of just bet small with everything. But we can attempt to exploit him here. So he's going to have, I think, a fair amount of ace highs in his range. He's going to bet all of them, so when he checks, we win every time. Get a second check from this player, and I'm just going to underbet the turn. I don't expect this to be an extremely strong range, and this is the same guy. If you rewind to near the beginning of the video, he's the one who raised my underbet as well. Of course, not a super strong hand here. I do chop with a lot of aces, I lose to a lot of hands. But overall, once I check back flop, it's going to be one of the best hands that I show up with. So let's go call turn. Probably fold this river if he bombs it. But he decides to go for a check, and because I don't get value out of other aces because we chop, and because I don't really expect a jack to check raise me all that often on the turn, I'm just going to check back here and expect to win a fair amount. I decide to go with the check back line with the 10s on this board, and I get underbet for, wow, that's a really small one. All right, let's peel. See how it goes. There's of course a metric ton of draws villain can have here, but he bombs river, and I think I am going to fold now. Got a limper, that's always nice. Gonna raise up the ace 10, which is gonna be pretty much exactly the bottom of my range here. Which naturally means when we get 3-bet, we can release bottom of range quite quickly. It's tempting now because odds, but I think ace 10 offsuit is still just can do much worse than we want it to. This is a spot where I'd rather have something like 7-8 suited. I'd rather have ace deuce suited than the ace 10 here. I'm going to choose to check turn as well, and then bluff some rivers. But no need to bluff. Looks like it's just a spot where I actually improve. Monkey leads out. Monkey had the opportunity to lead out on the turn and decided not to take it. Maybe going for a check raise against some sort of ace with some strong hands. But I think a lot of just plain aces would have led out, just betting for protection on this type of board. I think that's something we'll see quite a bit. I'm going to make this river call, though I don't expect it to be extremely profitable. We're getting just about 3-1, and I think with those kind of odds, we're going to do just fine. Moderately annoying spot against easy money. He has been quite aggressive, so that makes me want to continue against him more, and we're getting fairly good odds on the 4-bet. Either way, should be pretty close, and I'm a little off-put at the speed at which he threw in the 4th bet there. Don't really think many people are just going to be like snap 4-betting there with some random bluff. So it's either, he's got a plan set out in his mind that, I raise this hand, and if I get 3-bet, I'm just going to snap 4-bet it, or it's just a big value hand. I'm going to take a small-ish bluff line on this flop. Turn, that is a double gutter, yes. Is my math correct? Yes, it is. Now I kind of want to plan out my bet sizing here. And because it's against a casual player, I think I do want to go to the smaller side. I'm even going to just go 1250 here. Essentially trying to see the river really cheaply. And I'm going to choose not to bluff the server because it's going to be a very good one for his range. The other option that I was thinking about for a bet sizing line was just to go really big on turn and really big on river as well. The problem with that is I'm up against what looks to be a casual player, and those aren't typically the guys that I try to get to fold top pair. So because of that, I just go for the, I guess, smaller line there. Decided to defend here with 4-6. A little bit of a loose defend, but it's against a min raise, and it's also against a casual player. So I feel comfortable making it on the ace-king X board. We just got a dumper hand. Let's see if we can sneak in here with the ace-3. We'll be 3-betting a king-10, checking flop with the ace-3. Very nice flop. Got the nut flush draw. I've been trying to mess around with like sizing on this type of board recently, and I think for the moment I'm just going to kind of start with just bet really small and see how it goes. The king on the turn is kind of cool. When I bet that size on the flop, king is actually ahead of a fairly significant part of villain's range. I'm going to check it though. If it goes check-check, I don't really mind. This leaves me in a pretty cool spot where if he bets turn, the flush comes in on the river, I can check to him and he'll bluff it very often. Essentially just assuming my range is capped. He goes for the small bet. When he makes that small bet, I don't think he's bluffing too much. Of course, we have, crazy good odds, and we're absolutely going to be calling here. Yeah, we're good. Be curious to see what he decides to bet there for that sizing. I mean, for that sizing, I think he would want to bet fairly light with his value hands, but that doesn't really make sense on that board if you're losing to king 10. I'm going to bet small on this river, turning my pair into a bluff. I do think, I don't know if I necessarily, rep the most there, but it's a spot where my pair of threes benefits so much from getting him to fold hands such as 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, some ace highs, similar to the hand that I had. Actually, no, sorry, it doesn't benefit from getting ace highs to fold because we're beating ace highs. My bad, misspoke there. But it benefits from getting him to fold lowish pairs, and I think there's enough combinations of those that if we just make a small bet there, it'll end up being profitable. So I defend in the big blind with queen 9 versus the min raise. He starts with actually a fairly sizable bet. I am continuing with basically any pair on this flop. He decides to check back. And I'm actually considering a value bet here. But I think overall maybe a check call will do better since he went so large on the flop. Going to go a little larger here against the casual player, try to milk out the extra value while I assume I have the best hand. 7 comes in, it's moderately connected, but I still feel quite comfortable about my hand. I'm essentially just going to bet fold this on all streets unless the river gets really, really ugly. Oh, we got Mark in suit playing. The elusive, really, really tight short stacker. I'll have to figure out some sort of tag to give him. I'm on a new computer right now, so a lot of players that I had marked in the past are no longer marked. That's why you guys kind of see, a lot of people with absolutely nothing on them, no notes either. I'll eventually get around to transferring those from my old computer. Sixes doesn't flop exceptionally well, and and we face a pretty reasonable sized bet. Yeah, it's just going to be a fold. Because market suit is, you know, one of those aggressive type short stackers, you know, not the type of guy who just deposited $40 and bought in for it. He actually, you know, has a pretty aggressive strategy with it. You go for the min raise, blind versus blind. The other option, if players are going to be 3-betting you a ton, is just to go for a like a limping strategy, blind versus blind. But at the moment, I don't really have a good one of those worked out. So we go for the small raise strategy instead. And getting another lovely hand. Getting a little bit of action from at least one half-stack player. 3-way, I don't think we want to be betting hands like pocket jacks on this board. It'll go for a check. Ideally, this will check through. And if it doesn't, we basically get the always annoying spot of whether or not we should be check calling jacks here. I think if small blind comes along, it's fairly easy to just dump my hand because it's going to be really rare that I'm actually ahead. And even if I'm ahead, it's very hard to call multiple streets against one guy. And for these odds, I think I am going to make the peel. Once again, annoying spot on the turn. I think I'm going to fold here, though I feel like this is really nitty when I have the Jack of Hearts. I'm not entirely sure what I should be doing with that hand in that situation. It's a hand that's absolutely obliterated by a heck of a lot of value hands, and if villain is kind of on the looser side, then I block some of his draws there, and of course you can have just a heck of a lot of top pair aces. But then again, you know, on the flip side of the coin, guys, that's probably one of the stronger hands I'm going to show up with the majority of the time, so we want to make sure to not just snap fold those too often. I decided to overcall after 3 players were in the pot with 6s. I think that's pretty standard, and we're just going to check fold on this flop. You know, actually, you know, I'm completely okay with this bet size. I'm just going to go $5 on this flop. It's very dry, and the fact that there's 2 players against me, you know, I don't think makes a crazy difference in how often I should be c-betting there. I was kind of curious. I wanted to see how the big blind would react again because he was the one who has been raising my underbets. I think ace-9 is definitely strong enough to be raising here, blind versus blind, so let's just start off with that. And I was just making this comment a couple days ago. I feel like I'm seeing a lot more people limp and fold to a raise recently than I have in the past. I feel like for the last year or even 2, basically, the majority of the time somebody's limping, it's with the intention of limp calling, and you know nobody ever really folds. But we just saw somebody fold, limp fold blind versus blind there. And if that's something we see that they're going to be doing frequently, then it's a real good opportunity to just open the hell out of your range, even potentially just raise any 2 cards, simply because Well, if they're folding, your hand doesn't matter. That's free money. And then it becomes just, you know, a folding frequency type thing. There's definitely a number that if he's folding over a certain threshold, you're profitable with any 2 cards. And you just have to work that one out. We got a few more hands to fold. The Jack-9 is a fairly strong hand. We'll see what we can do with it on the button. Got a small raise, get an overcall. You know, I think we can get away with just calling here as well for this price. I need to make a decision here if I want to get Ace-Jack offsuit in. Pre-flop for 33 big blinds. And because I know that this player's tight, I kind of want to say no. I do still want to play it though, so I'm going to go for the flat. We also have a casual player in the big blind. Letting them come in as well is, you know, fine by me. And so because I don't really want to get all in with a lot of like kind of marginal hands, I'm going to be starting to flat here with quite a few hands that are actually going to be better than Ace-Jack on this board. Stuff like Queen-Jack suited, stuff like King-Queen, stuff like medium pairs. I'm probably 3-bet getting in 9s, but stuff like 8s, 7s, 6s. So I think overall Ace-Jack falls pretty low in range there. And we can just get away with folding it. And alright guys, the video has been going for nearly 45 minutes. Let's kind of look around, find a nice hand to wrap this one up with. I'm going to be flatting the Queen-10 here for the sole purpose of letting the big blind in. And he decides to go for a squeeze, which I don't think is something I've seen from him yet. Of course, I'm going to be continuing. He has 3-bet before. So, alright. Let's call, and we flop a flush draw right on. Okay, we flopped 2 flush draws. Guys, these are going to be the last 2 hands of the video. Oh, that's gross. That is legitimately gross. So if we give him a strong range, because I haven't seen him 3-bet all that much. So if we give him a strong range, meaning we're never really ahead here, then we need a good chunk of implied odds. And because of his stack size, like I would have to call here and just get his entire stack every time. That's gross. I hate the fact that he bet so big and that the pot is so inflated. You know what? Oops. Yeah, so I clicked fold there. You know what? I'm gonna post that with the kind of interesting hands along with the video, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about that play, because like if if we're going solely on like odds and implied odds there, which, you know, you can't really assume that Queen High is good all that often, we just got to get a stack like every time. I don't know. I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say on it. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this has been Darius KomodoDragonJesus Vita for Poker VIP. Make sure to leave comments, questions, anything like that below the video, and I'll see you guys next time.